Season 2 is finally among us, guys.
What is being married like?
Yeah, we've been married for 1.5 years now. For me, I forget. Thanks, Beyonce.
And I'm excited for this new adventure of Season 2. Let's go.
Yay.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, girls.
Thank you.
We are here for another episode. My name is Leiji, and I'm here with Beth, Sion, and Naomi. And today the topic is very spicy
Come on.
Spicy.
because we're gonna talk about sex.
Yes.
Come on, we're gonna have the sex conversation.
We are.
Controversial or not. But before we start, I just want to say, if you don't feel comfortable about the topic or if you're not old enough to be in this conversation, because we can go a bit graphic or explicit. Well, it may be for some people.
Who knows where it'll take us?
Also, if you know us well and you don't want to hear about sex from our point of view, tune out now.
Mom, this will be a great episode to tune out.
Absolutely. So no hard feelings if this is the one that you don't want to hear. It's fine. But at the same time, the reason why we are talking about this topic, it's because we want to make it into a healthy conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We
Absolutely.
want girls to be able to talk about sex without shame
Yes.
in a safe place. So
Absolutely.
we just want to start that. That's our heart behind it.
For sure.
Yeah. Don't worry, we're not gonna just go through like, what are the best positions? Like, how do I do if I want to have kids? Like, what is the best? We don't need to go. Maybe we go. I don't know. But
With us, you never know.
yeah, you never know. But I just want to start, since we said we are going for the sex talk. Did you guys had that talk with your parents?
The sex talk.
The sex
talk.
Great
No,
question.
I did not.
I full point blank, full stop. I'm trying to remember. 32 now. I'm trying to go back. Not really. Like, my mom was very professional. Like, she took all of us girls individually, like, out to the city, and we we stayed in a hotel and all that kind of stuff. And then, she talked about period and all that kind of stuff. And we touched on like sex, but in a medical way also, and stuff like that. But a lot of it, to be honest, I kind of knew. So, but yeah, she did. But I'm trying to remember if I think I mostly we talked about it with our friends, but I heard more the medical side from my mom, which is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember a time when I didn't know about sex. So in terms
Checks
of
out.
I think in terms of maybe just I think a lot of people have the moment of the sit down moment where they hear about it and it's the birds and the bees. Yeah. And I genuinely just don't remember not knowing about it. So I don't know if my parents sat me down for a conversation when I was really young. I think it was probably more of they were quite open and sharing with us from quite an early age, not all the details, but what sex was.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's good. I didn't have either. It was that's it. I didn't have the sex talk. I heard pretty much from friends and conversations at school.
Yeah.
Never at church.
Yeah.
So that was where it was. I thought that at some point my mom was going to talk to me. I don't know, maybe before I got married or stuff, but no, it's fine. You do you.
She never told you about it.
No,
Dang.
we never talked about that. I feel like now that I have a kid and I'm much older, I feel that if I went to talk with my mom about those things, I think she would be chill about it.
Yeah.
But I think a few years ago, it wasn't really...
A conversation.
It could be a bit awkward.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of friends have gotten people have told me I was have you ever had that talk? Did your parents ever give you? Yeah, they just gave me a book here.
Yeah, that's what I hear a lot.
A lot. It's here's the book,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm curious then, for those of you who weren't ever told about it, but I guess at some point figured out what sex was, how old were you when you genuinely kind of had a better understanding of what sex was?
I started having sexual relations something call it. I started having sex when I was probably about 15, 16. Yeah. And so I learned like from school or from my boyfriend at the time. It was never, nothing really shocked me massively. Like it wasn't like some big surprise. I must have learned about it or got to know it. Maybe I did have conversation. I don't have a memory of it. Yeah. But everything I learned was from friends at school, playing around, or just my boyfriend at the time. Yeah. Telling me about it. So I don't think I learned the healthy sides of it. I definitely didn't learn about sex from a biblical standpoint at all. I mean, I had a Christian background-ish, but I definitely didn't follow God at the time. So I just kind of learned from it as it's shameful, it's wrong, but I was doing it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I think it was around the same time, and it was like at school, but like from friends, as I was saying. Yeah. And in Brazil, we don't have sex education at school. Like sometimes a biology teacher or like science teacher will just touch a little bit on the topic. I remember when I was in like, I don't know, the equivalent from like, I think it was 14. And then this teacher, she comes into the class and she's like, look, I feel like it's important you guys know about those things. I'm going to go through a few topics. And if you have questions, you can write on the paper. Don't need to put your name on, but any kind of question. But half of the classroom was like so awkward and like of course making fun, just putting like random stuff on the paper. And I was so unaware of anything that I came to the teacher and I said, oh my gosh, I'm just thinking about that now. I came to her and then said, can I look through the book and then I give you a question? And she looked at me like, do you want to read something in the book and then come up with a question? You don't have any kind of question? Yeah. I'm like, not genuine one. Like, no, I have no idea what I would ask. And then she's like, it's okay, whatever. If you don't have questions, it's fine as well. You can hear like whatever the other ones are asking. But yeah, I think that was all the sex education I had from like school. And it's a bit of a big thing in Brazil. It's getting a bit more out there right now. But when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, the schools were completely against that. It was like, if your parents talk to you about that or not, that's their responsibility. In the school, we don't talk about it.
Right. Yeah. I think for me, I probably say like 15. That's when I like the detail and all that kind of stuff.
For all of you, it was about 15 probably.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And I never went to like public school. I went to like private school. So a lot of like my friends that went to public school, they would tell us like, I would ask them like, did you guys have like the sex talk, whatever? And they're like, yeah, but it's mostly like banana condom.
Yeah, we did the whole
and I was like, thing. All right,
I remember that. So it's more teaching you how not to get pregnant.
Yes.
Like they don't teach you about how to have a healthy sex life. They teach
you
how not to get pregnant. And how not to get an STD. Basically.
For sure.
Yeah. And how, well, now the three of us are married. So what could we say that was like expectations and reality? When like before what you thought it would be and how it is now?
Well, I guess this is different. Like, Naomi, you had sex for the first time on your wedding night, right?
I did.
So I think you've got more. I feel like you have more of a expectations versus the reality.
Yeah. Although in some ways I was thinking, I bet Beth would have more to say about this, because I feel like I guess it's a different one even from expectations versus reality of just sex or no sex.
Right.
Or if the conversation was even more around sex inside of marriage, sex outside of marriage. Yeah. I think for me, just off of that, like I honestly don't think there was all that much that I was surprised by, or that where my expectations didn't match.
Right.
Because, as I said, I think my parents were very open with us on the whole about what sex was. They were pretty open with us even about just in general, the reality that for some it's like sex is very easy, and for others it takes much longer to kind of find your rhythm with your spouse or with whoever you're with, that kind of thing. And also even just this sense of depending on the stage of life you're in, whether you're hitting menopause or during pregnancy or after pregnancy or different things like that, how that can impact sometimes your sex drive or even just whether you are physically able to have sex painlessly. So I think I didn't have like a massive shock. Right. In fact, if anything, like I remember being shocked by the fact that on my wedding night, when Connor and I had sex for the first time, I remember just having this thing where I was like, wow, this just feels so normal and so natural. And I'm like, I was almost shocked at how familiar and how like comfortable it felt for me. Because I think I'd expected that it was going to be a real like, this is awkward and cringy and I don't know how we do this and like that kind of thing. But it really wasn't. It felt very like comfortable. And I think that comes even just from our relationship. Right. Us really knowing one another and really trusting one another.
That's so good.
Mm-hmm. So back to you, Beth.
Are we talking about sex as in when I was married?
I think either.
Yeah.
Like how is it for you now that you are in a relationship? Like,
yeah, it's so different. I mean, going back to when I was younger, my first time having sex, it was at the time I was a teenager. So you're doing everything you can apart from having sex. And then eventually you cave in and you have sex. Mm-hmm. And so I was just kind of like, it was nothing. I was pressured into it, like classic kind of teenage boy, teenage girl thing. Like it was just what it was. And I didn't really enjoy it. I always felt guilty. Like it was okay.
Yeah.
Then
can I ask really quickly on that? Sorry, I'm like diving in. Of course. When you say the thing of like, I felt pressured into it, I'm curious just for other people who would either have gone through that or maybe wouldn't even know what does that mean? Like what is being pressured into it or what is just...
Yeah.
I think in the immaturity of being a teenager things are different now than they were when I was a teenager. It's not that long ago, but I think it was the idea is everybody's doing it. The reality is it's not true.
Yeah.
But the idea is everybody's doing it. Yeah. And so I think more common, the guys would be pressuring the girls in the sense of like, you've got a boyfriend. It's like, come on, you're my girlfriend. Like, this is how you show, I was told this is how you show love. This is what love is. This is how you show that you love me, you know, like, and it wasn't as bad as maybe it sounds. Like I was very like, oh, that's probably true because I didn't know, you know, and I did think it was normal. So the pressure is more like I was having this conviction inside of me because I was like, I did believe in God, so I knew it was kind of wrong, but I didn't have a stronger relief of why. I was told, that's in the Bible. That was just for back in the day when it was super religious, when people got married about our age. So it made sense then, you know, like, and so it was just kind of every excuse in the book. And so it was kind of a slow kind of like, first it starts this way and you move up the bases, you know, and then eventually it becomes sex. So that's what it looked like for me being pressured. It wasn't some big moment and someone was like forcing me to. No, it wasn't that at all. Yeah. It was like kind of a slow process.
Yeah.
So that's what it looked like.
Yeah. And you're carrying on. I want to hear more as well of the journey.
Okay. And then so going into my more adult years and having more kind of casual sex, which I wouldn't recommend. It got me into a lot of trouble. It got me into some sticky situations. And it was really, I'm not going to lie to you guys. It was fun at the time. It felt good. Sex isn't bad. Like it felt good. It was pleasurable. We had fun. Like I had some great experiences. But at the end of the day, if I'm looking back, I was broken and I was hurting and it fed into my insecurities more and more and more. Yeah. And it didn't make me feel valued and it didn't make me feel like properly loved. And so, and I had some very bad experiences in that and some, as I said, good experiences in that. And then when I got married, like the difference is crazy, honestly. Like I was really worried and processing this with my husband before we were married. I was like, he had never had a sexual experience. And I had obviously so much background and like I'd worked through this. And my fear was also that I would have, because I had some very uncomfortable feelings around it. I was very kind of like, it just brought me back to the past and stuff. So I was worried that I would be feeling gross and I would be feeling shame and I would be feeling all these negative emotions that on that wedding night. But I just had to trust that it would be okay and I processed it a lot. And on the night, it was great. It was wonderful. It was, I think similar to what you said, it just felt right. Yeah. And it felt good and it felt okay. And then once we started to get our rhythm a bit more, the first time it was nice and it was good, but it definitely got better as we figured out each other's rhythm throughout the days or throughout the day or whatever. I actually remember one experience. It was just the same week that we got married and we were having sex and I was crying, guys. So lame. I was crying because, and he was like, what's wrong? And I literally was like, I did not know sex could feel this good. Like, and I was so emotional about it because I was like, it's so like, it's so beautiful when you have it, because it's true intimacy with somebody who has chosen you and waited for you and loves you, and you're being completely vulnerable with them. And you know that they're not going to leave you, that they're not going to go, that you don't have to try and impress them. It's just about intimacy. The goal is not to have an orgasm or to make them orgasm or to impress them. It is literally just to be intimate with each other. And that freedom was so good for me. And it's just got better since, obviously.
That's amazing.
So good.
That was a bit of a long story. Sorry, guys.
No, that's
so great.
I'm like really listening to all of that.
So good.
Yeah. I love that about the intimacy. And it's something that sometimes people question, like, oh, but you're gonna sleep with the same person for the rest of your life? Do you want to have sex with just that one person? But you're building something together. Like, you can explore things together. You can learn different things about each other, and you can go through that. I feel we were joking before we started recording about, like, oh yeah, missionary, we're missionaries and everything. But it can be so much more than that, you know, because you can make yourself vulnerable with your partner. You can hopefully you can talk to them and say, let's try this or let's try that, you know, and then build something that it can be just for fun. It can be just for, you know, so tomorrow night, why not? If you want to put on the schedule, put on the schedule. But it's really building this thing together. It's amazing being able to do that.
Absolutely. I think, like, for you three women, like, I think one of the things I've, like, noticed, like, a lot of my friends who are married and all that kind of stuff is, like, talking about expectations. So, like, you know, when you go on your honeymoon, like, you talk about ahead of time, like, hey, what the expectation, like, you know, there could be a chance that one of you maybe had sex before and other didn't, right? So to talk about, I think that's so important to talk about expectations, because I think so often you know, I know few people that have been, like, nervous, like, oh, I'm kind of nervous, you know, if they were, like, a virgin or, like, you know. And so is that something that when you guys got married and, like, for your honeymoon, like, talked about expectations ahead of time, like, hey, like, you know, because there is that nervousness and
with your future husband.
With your future husband or, so, like on your, like, before your honeymoon or even, like, before your wedding, like, hey, let's talk about, you know, sex. Let's talk about the expectations that we have. Right. Is that something?
Yeah, I think Connor and I definitely did. We communicated a lot, to be honest, about some of those things even before we were married. And I think one of those was the thing of, to be honest, my whole life, I would say that I feel like I've had quite a high sex drive. And I was, like, always, from when I was younger, I was just like, I don't know, I just feel like I do. I don't know if I do. I just think that I do. And maybe that's just one of those things where everyone thinks that they do. But I think it was interesting because obviously before we got married, I didn't actually know, like, I didn't know if I would enjoy sex. I didn't know if I would be able to have sex the first night. I didn't know if I would find it comfortable or, you know. And so I think that was one of those things even where I was like, hey, I recognize that, like, I think that I have a high sex drive.
Right.
And I could be going into this thinking like, oh, just be super easy or whatever. But at the same time, I actually don't know, you know, because I've never had sex. So I think for me, that was super good because we even were able to talk about that. And Connor was really, like, I say gracious, but honestly, I'm like, it's just the way that everyone should be. It should never be viewed as something that's like, oh, it's so gracious of them. Yeah. But where it's like, Connor was just, like, really great at being like, hey, if we can't even have sex during our honeymoon, like, that's okay. We can work through it and we have the rest of our lives to figure things out and let's just have fun and that kind of thing. So my personal experience was like, it was actually ended up being totally fine. And I kind of was surprised then because I was like, oh. But I think that even is something that you really get within this picture of marriage, of, like, doing life with someone for the rest of your life, you know, where it's like, there's no time crunch to solving this. We can work through this. True. And I'm going to be there.
Yes.
Like, and I will prefer you in some of these things as well.
That is such a good point, I think, as well, to just repeat what you said. I think a lot of people maybe have a fear. And then when they aren't sexually compatible on their honeymoon, they're like, oh gosh, like, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? But it's that thing of, this is for life. You have a lifetime now together to work this out and to do it. And I think that's a really good thing because I think we got very blessed, or I know that you and I haven't asked you that question, very blessed where it was very easy sexually on the first experiences. But I know many people who that's not the case for it. And it doesn't mean that you aren't destined for each other. It doesn't mean that you guys are a wrong fit. It just means some things take longer than others, and that's okay.
Yeah. And like even that is just this thing of, had that been your first experience on, say, a night out with someone that you don't really know very well, and say you're not able to have sex, you know what I mean? Is like, I've spoken to people where it's like, oh gosh, I'm so glad that I had this experience within marriage, where it's like the person that I was with was willing to work it through with me for the rest of my life, rather than having one poor experience of sex that then kind of makes me feel insecure, and then that pushes me from kind of even having continued relationships in the future, because it's like, well, what if I can never have sex with them? You know, what if it's always a disappointment, or kind of those things that we can kind of work up in our minds.
And I think hearing all of you guys, and when you touched on like, you know, when you had sex with your husband, it's just like, you know, you start crying because like there's that intimacy, that connection, and this is a man that like pursued you and waited for you. And I think when I like, if I could do life again, like I would say like, wait, wait for that, because it is, you're giving yourself away, right? And like, you know, you want to give yourself to someone that like loves you so much, and is, you know, and that you have that connection and that, you know, and stuff like that. So I was just like, it's so true.
It's not old-fashioned. It's not out of date. It's not for the Bible times. It's for now, and there's a reason it's for now. It's even more prominent now when sex is being distorted, and sex is something that people can just do at any time with anybody, like whenever they feel like it. It's vital, I think. Like, I think it's so important if you want to what's the word? Like, be secure in yourself and be secure in your relationship. Anybody who truly loves you is going to wait for that, you know? And I'm not saying they don't love you if they don't wait for that. Like, I know it is difficult when you've got temptations, and, you know, Jonas and I struggled before we were married to keep our hands off each other in that way. It is a struggle, but it is to keep your hands off Jonas.
Well, we're about to like, what? with Connor.
It's a struggle. A sacrifice isn't a sacrifice unless it's a sacrifice, you know? And
you know yourself. Like, that's the thing where you just said, like, some of you, like, if you're dating and you're of faith, you know, keep having boundaries. You know how far you can take it now, you know? So it's creating those boundaries so you don't put yourself in those positions, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
And for me, there's this thing of, I've never had to have the experience, which I'm super grateful for, of having sex and being super vulnerable and intimate with a person, and then like the classic story of waking up the next day and them having left, you know, or like them not being around anymore, or that tension of like, oh, and the frustration, insecurity of like, oh, is this just a one-time thing? Is this for longer? Like, and so I think even within that there is just this, like, in my opinion, it's like, sex is holistic, you know, it is not just the physical. And I think we've talked about this even just outside of the filming times or whatever, but where I actually would say that I probably am wired a bit more, like typically what people would say is kind of more masculine in terms of in my relationship with Connor. I am much more the one who's like, oh, I just enjoy the physical aspect of sex, you know? And he's much more the person who would be like, oh, I want it to be more like emotional and more of a story and more, you know, like warm me up. Like, and I'm like, oh, I'm good to go. Like
get up.
So I think like, I think even with that kind of thing is like the reality is it is designed to be this holistic thing, which is like with relationship, with time, with intimacy, with the physical aspects, with the being turned on. And I think that is something that I really don't want us to lose. Because I remember sitting on a train recently and seeing this advert, which was like, it was like about demisexual is now a term for people, I think, who want to have sex with the intimacy and kind of with relationship, with an emotional connection. Yeah. And I was like, the fact that we're now at a time where it's like, that seems to be an abnormal thing to people, that it needs its own name, where it's sad. Like, are you someone who wants sex but also wants an emotional connection? And I'm like, what? Like, so I think there is just that thing of really like not just, because I like the physical side, but still for me, it isn't just physical. It is emotional, and it's the safety that you have with that person. And like you said, Leiji, the journey that you get to walk on with that person throughout your life that grows it and makes it more exciting and makes it richer.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So good.
Yeah.
And sometimes this journey is going to be like spot on straight away, and sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
I feel like I was just thinking, it was 7 years ago when I got married, so I'm trying to remember. But for me, another thing that was a bit of a struggle was actually the intimacy of like living in the same house. And I remember I would go to take a shower and I would lock the bathroom, and then Eduardo would come to like just walk in, and he's like knocking at the door like, babe, I need to use the toilet. I'm like, I'm showering. It's like, and I'm like, okay, hold up. And then I would go and like hiding myself. And he's like, we've done,
I've seen you, baby.
I've seen you. Like, what are you hiding? I'm like, it was just it took me some time to just turn the key, you know, because I grew up listening for so long, like, sex is wrong, like don't do it, it's like it's bad. And then you get married, it's beautiful, it's amazing, it's what you should do. And I'm like, how do you go from one to another, you know? And even when you're inside of marriage and you're having sex with your husband, you still can feel guilty. Like I would feel guilty sometimes. And I could not enjoy the whole moment through, because in the back of my mind I was like, can I enjoy now?
Right.
Is it okay to be feeling it right now? You know, because it was just for so long in one way. And then on that moment I'm like, okay, now it's okay. So for me, it took me that time. And I talked to girls before that they said that they also felt that because they came from a very like traditional religious church where like you could not talk, you could not have that conversation. So for me it was more, it wasn't that I could not connect. It was nothing to do with him and it was just me, myself, and I. You know, going through that process of just unlocking that and letting myself enjoy it. You know, just it's almost as feeling guilty for the pleasure. That feeling on that moment.
And I think that's so much then to do with the way that you're educated even about sex when you're younger. You know, because I have friends who have had very similar experiences to that. And to be honest, even with Connor, like, interestingly, I went into it and neither of us had sex before we got married. But I went into having sex when we were married, and I was like, oh, it's amazing. It's like, you know, now it's like available to you, like and I just had no kind of a sense of it being wrong. It was like just finally I get to enjoy this wonderful thing that I've been told all about and have had to wait for, and now it's the time that I get to do it with this person that I love. But I think for him even, and like not going into detail, but I think for him even having struggled in the past when he was in his teenage years a bit more with things like porn, is he found it much harder to disconnect and to kind of switch it now from when I get this output, it's now a positive thing rather than before when I was a teenager and it was a wrong thing. And it filled me with guilt and it filled me with shame and it left me feeling lonely. So still, I think that's something that we work through within our marriage is that difference in like the way the experiences shape our understanding and our perspective on sex. And also the way that education does. And so I think it's so important. Someone once gave me a really good kind of like explanation of sex where they're like, sex is like a fire. And they're like, if you have a fire in the right place, like outside, like kind of bonfire vibes, you know, they're like, it's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. They're like, but if you build a fire in the middle of a house, it's going to burn the house down. And I think although it's a very simplified way of saying it, I think it is helpful to see it. Like, I want my kids to know that sex is this great thing in the right context. You know? And so it not to be it's an awful negative thing that you should avoid at all cost to now suddenly being this wonderful thing and having that awkward shift that then you're having to make. But actually that clear communication of you were created, like as humans, we are created for relationship. We are created for sex. God created sex. He loves marriage. He loves sex within marriage. And actually it's this beautiful thing that you get to share for the right context.
And I think that's really good. And I think like so often like Hollywood sells like sex is just like this, you know, like in the movies when you see it, it's just like, oh, it's beautiful, like, you know, and I think sex is beautiful in the right context and stuff ever. But I think there are those that have, you know, sex wasn't always a positive thing.
Yeah.
They've you know, whether it be abused and stuff ever. So I think when you end up with, you know, someone that you love, the love of your life, you know, it still could take time before sex can be beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And so I think sex looks so different for everybody, and it's not beautiful for everybody because of what experience, you know, the negative experience.
Absolutely. And I think that's so good in that context, never to compare.
Yeah.
In general, don't compare yourself to others, but with your sex life as well, even in a healthy context, like talking more personally and intimate with Lady and Naomi, we have very different sex lives. Yeah. And I'm not thinking, I'm not insecure thinking, oh, maybe I should be more like Lady when I'm, you know, because her personality and her relationship with her husband is so different to my relationship with my husband. Yeah. And it's fine. It's not about anybody else. And that's the thing. There's only you and your husband in the bedroom, you know, hopefully. And so it's you don't have to compare. Don't be insecure. If you guys are having a good time and if it's working and you're having sex, don't worry about it. Like it's fine. It's okay.
And if you're not having a good time, talk about it.
Right? Tell each other what you like and don't like. I don't know.
The way you want to go, how you want to do. Talk about it. Like it's your partner.
Yeah.
You should be able to vocalize that.
And not that you have to talk intimately about sex with these people, but I would always recommend having like an older couple or someone like that you talk to.
You're talking about my parents again.
I was just talking about
Naomi's parents mentor me and my husband.
John and Susie.
Mentor me and my husband in so many ways. And it was freeing. Like they talked to us before we had our wedding night and they just gave us a lot of freedom and were like, if this doesn't work and if this like, you know.
Yeah, it's good.
They gave us tips and what to do. And you don't have, it doesn't mean, I mean, I don't sit and talk intimately about our sex life with them. We don't need to. But when there's other problems, because everything does affect your sex life.
Yeah.
Like when there's anything else, we process and we talk with that. And if you don't have an older couple, like I would suggest having marriage counseling. You don't have to wait till there's a problem before you have marriage counseling.
Yeah,
that's
you don't have to wait till there's a problem before you talk to somebody. Do it before you have the problem to avoid the problem. I think it's a great idea. I mean, I've been married for 1.5 years. So, you know, I don't come from a world of wisdom. I don't come from years and years of experience. I can... in this, we're always only talking from our own point of view and our own experiences.
And also, I think on that, like reaching out is like if you've like experienced sexual abuse or whatever, and you like you don't have to be in that alone. Like, you know, reach out to one of us or you know, and get somebody that you feel safe with to talk about. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, what direction do we go now?
How much time do we have? Because I
could go on forever.
Yeah. No, I don't want just to close for the sake of closing it. But yeah, I think it's just going back. It's so good having someone older to talk about. And I was just thinking like, do I have someone? Yes, I have someone that I talk about those things. Yeah. And it's very, very helpful, you know. Yeah. And sometimes you just need someone to just laugh about it or just take out all the heaviness. But also, you don't need to know everything before you get married as well. Like you can, it's healthy to have this conversation. I have friends that they are single, they never had experience before, and they ask me questions and I'm like, okay, you want to know that's like this and that, and like, but I'm talking about myself. Like that's my own experience, but it's just not really bringing shame on that conversation. It's just healthy to know, but it's at the same time, it's really good to explore with your husband as well and knowing those other things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think there's also this thing of people will talk about sex. The world is talking about sex
everywhere.
Like you're going to get educated about sex somewhere, you know? And so I think there's even that question of like, okay, it's going to come from somewhere who you can actually kind of choose where it comes from, you know, and where is it going to come from? And so I know sometimes even within Christian circles and friendship groups, it can feel awkward to talk about sex because people, like you were saying, is sometimes even in different places. Some maybe, you know, love the Lord, walking in their faith, but have already had sex, you know, and maybe even where you stand in terms of what you kind of think about it is a little bit different. But I would really encourage you, like they were saying, of like, to talk to someone who's older, but also to talk to your friends and particularly your other Christian friends, you know, and kind of just genuinely share, genuinely process, because it's like at the end of the day, or within your families, like if you're not going to have a space for that there, then it will be YouTube. Or it'll be girl talk.
Yeah. Let's go. Yeah. So good.
Yeah. And we are here if you guys want to talk about it, if you want to, I don't know, anything. We really want to make this place safe. This is a space for you, safe to not only hear from our own experiences, but to be able to vocalize that as well.
Ask your questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, girls.
Thank
for
you.
this time. And hopefully we'll see you soon again.
Yes.